Today I'm going to tell you about the country that I was dreaming about before I had any solid plans on how we were going to get there. Basically, nobody in America has ever heard of Tbilisi or the country of Georgia, and that was part of the appeal for us. But the other part of the appeal was I had heard of this small Eastern European country on the east side of the Black Sea from a podcast that I really liked, a travel podcast. I probably heard about it in 2016, 2017, and my interest was piqued. So in fall of 2018, I went on a trip with my best friend, who I talk about a lot here. She's my friend who passed from cancer a few years later. And we went on this trip to Cappadocia, where all the hot air balloons are in Turkey, and then to Georgia. I rode into Tbilisi in a taxi, no seatbelts in the back seat. You're sliding all across the back seat. There was the most bizarre song on the radio. It was a Toto song, you know, the people who sing the Africa song from way back. They have a song called Georgie Porgy, and apparently it still gets played on the radio pretty regularly in the Republic of Georgia. So we're riding in, it's like 11:30 at night, we're sliding across the back seat, driving through these roads, or riding in a taxi through these roads. On the radio is blasting Georgie Porgy pudding pie, kiss the girls and make them cry. My friend and I are like looking at each other like, where are we? And then as we began to ride on the road down into Tbilisi, I can't describe it any other way except maybe driving into New York at night, where you're just like awestruck by everything lit up. It's a big city. It's a city of 2 million people. The architecture is a mix of modern and Soviet concrete block and really unique, bizarre buildings, ones that look like mushrooms, ones that look like a Jenga game, and everything was lit up and the music was playing, and it was just this gorgeous city. We passed into the city, and I mean, I just fell in love on first sight. So while I was in Georgia, I learned about their 8,000-year-old wine culture. They have a different way of making wine in clay pots under the ground. There's areas of the country that are gorgeous, gorgeous mountains that completely rival the Alps. There's the wine region where it's really famous for woodworking and growing wine with this old wine tradition. And all the men have mustaches and beards. So Gretchen and I, when we were there, we joked like, this is Andrew's place in the world. He had wanted to have a vineyard. So like, there's wine, there's woodworking, there's barbecue. They're in Spinetti. They're not Spinetti. I'm not going to remember the region name off the tip of my tongue because it's been a while, but they do barbecue and all the men have beards and mustaches there. I was like, I found my husband's place in the world. So Georgia is completely eclectic. It's completely outside the box, and that's why I love it. I am an eclectic, outside the box person myself. I had this immediate pipe dream after visiting Georgia for a week in the end of October, early November 2018, like, I want to move there. I had this long-term dream to live abroad, but I was like, I could see us living here. And part of the reason that Georgia was appealing to me was that you didn't have to do like a complicated visa process. As a US citizen, you were able to come as a tourist and enter Georgia and stay for a year. You could even set up bank accounts, and you could set up your business and have your business taxes be really low. There's a lot of benefits for Americans coming into Georgia, and you know, the political climate has changed since that time, but those things are still true as of the time I'm making this video in spring 2026. So Georgia It's a really hard place to describe, but Nat Geo called the most bohemian capital city in the world. I think that's why I loved it. There's just this mishmash of cultural influences and designs. The food is really fresh, really flavorful. I mean, the most flavorful food ever. So, anyway, those are some of the reasons that Georgia appealed to me and why I love it as a country, even still, after we lived there for a year and a half and don't live there anymore. But I wanted to talk about Georgia because I do think it's completely still a hidden gem in the world for travel. It's a very fun place to go visit. Tbilisi has these lovely European looking but very unique, colorful wooden porches with all kinds of interesting designs. It's just sort of this, it always felt to me like this hidden Garden of Eden type of place that so many people have never heard of. The fruits and vegetables that grow there, they have flavor unlike I have ever tasted in my whole life. Just the power of the flavor of things there is just, I mean, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced. If you've been watching for the last few days and seen how many times our move abroad plan came crashing down and how we were trying to figure out what we were going to do after our corporate transfer to Ireland didn't work out, and then when COVID derailed us and we ended up living in campers in my parents' yard, during the time that we were living in Nova Scotia house sitting, we wanted to go to Georgia. Georgia was our goal. And then it took much longer to get there than we expected because of COVID. But during the time that we were in the UK, sort of waiting things out, going to one of the countries that we were allowed to go to as Americans, in COVID, we got accepted to the Remotely from Georgia program, which at that time was the way to get into Georgia. They were one of the earlier countries to adopt a digital nomad visa, and that's what that was. As of fall 2020, we had been accepted, and so we started buying our tickets and we were all set to go to Georgia. We were so relieved, like we were finally going there. We had been in communication with people who are still friends of ours now. You know, we had met them when we were planning to be moving to Georgia. They did phone calls with us and they helped us buy our furniture before we came and get our rental sorted before we even entered the country so that we could have a place to just settle as soon as we did our hotel quarantine. And so everything was lining up and we were going to be flying on Turkish Air to Georgia. And a couple of days before we departed, our last flight got canceled because COVID, you know, so flights were getting canceled all over the place. And so we all, our family of 7, had tickets to get to Istanbul. And then we were like, what do we do now? Because the flights in Turkey were working, but the flights from Turkey to Georgia were just, they weren't getting rescheduled. It was just simply canceled. So we're like, okay. So what we did was we got a flight as far as east as we could in Georgia. I'm not in Georgia. As far east as we could in Turkey. We made it, all 7 of us, to a city called Trabzon, and it was a couple hours from the border with Georgia. It's a really cute place on the Black Sea in Turkey. We got in touch with a travel company who, you know, travel companies were not busy at the time, and they picked us all up in a van and drove us to the Turkish-Georgian border. So we walked on foot with all of our earthly belongings at the time, our 5 kids and our Shar-Pei puppy that we had gotten. She was totally a COVID puppy. Like, she was so that we all didn't die of depression, really, during COVID. when we were living in campers in my parents' yard. So we were a sight to behold. We walked across the border into Georgia and began our life there. It was a complete relief getting to finally have a home because, as you might remember from the last two videos, we had become accidentally nomadic when we were expecting to be moving to Ireland with a corporate transfer. Our landlord sold the house out from under us, and it was a whole big thing, and you can look at that story here. That's where the series begins. But at that point, we had not had a home for about a year and a half. So if you can imagine being nomadic with your family of 7, we had not had a place of our own for a year and a half at that point. And just all we wanted was to settle. We just wanted to settle. And that's when we moved into our hostel in Tbilisi. You can hear about the hostel. I think yesterday I showed a picture of it. It was this really unique living situation. It was $800 a month because they do US dollars for their rent there in Georgia. It was a 5-bedroom, 2,400 square foot hostel. And it had 4 or 5 bathrooms. I mean, it was the strangest place, but it also just had a lot of bedrooms. It was very modern looking. It had gorgeous big windows. It's where I became a plant person because the windows just let in so much light and sunlight. And so I lined them with plants. Georgia was where I became a plant lady. The relief that we felt finally getting to have a home again after wandering around, having our plans to move abroad fall apart repeatedly, living out of suitcases, living in campers in my parents' yard, living in my parents' tiny, tiny cabin with 1 bathroom. That was the moldy cabin that I mentioned in Wisconsin. We just hadn't had our own space, and I really enjoy decorating. The other day I did a video on micro joys, and I showed you around my house a little bit, but I find a lot of joy through having beautiful things, just little beautiful, useful things through my house to decorate. It was just this huge, huge exhale for us after not having stability as a family, because we had never intended really to be a nomadic family. It just sort of happened to us. We would have much preferred to just move to Ireland, get a home, settle in, and yet our dream was big enough. Our dream to live abroad was big enough and flexible enough that we just decided to go for it. And I'm glad we did. We had the opportunity to live in so many different places, and we really saw what we were made of when we didn't give up our dream to move abroad when the corporate transfer fell through, and when we didn't give up our dream to move abroad when we were living on $500 a month in campers in my parents' yard. We saw that our vision for our lives was bigger than the roadblocks and the disappointments that we kept coming against. And actually, those things, those parts are the wildest, most interesting parts of our story. I mean, I really don't know other families of 7 who walked across the Turkish-Georgian border in COVID. You know, I'm sure they might have been out there. They did look at us like we've never seen anything like this before. This multiracial American family with their dog and all their belongings, like showing up at the Georgian border. It was very unusual. We are very unusual and outside the box, and so is Georgia. And that's why I love it so much. You cannot fit Georgia into a box. It's Europe, but it feels a little bit like Asia. Even on the map, it's like located in Western Asia, but it feels more like Europe. It is a traditionally Orthodox country, so that makes it not feel really like the Middle East, but then it has some really interesting food influences. I mean, they have these dumplings called khinkali. I think dumplings and I think like Far Eastern Asia. So it's just such a fascinating place to live. It was a wonderful, welcoming place for us as a strange traveling family. And the time there was very unique and beautiful. And I am so glad that we got that time in Georgia. I miss it very much. And I alluded yesterday in yesterday's video to the financial troubles that we ran into. That was no fault of Georgia's and barely any fault of our own. It was just this unexpected stuff that made it really hard for us to financially make it. But that would have been, no matter where we were living at the time, that would have been the case. So Georgia was a really special time in our family story. It was a special time for me because literally we walked across that border almost 2 years to the day, almost exactly from the day I had visited Georgia the first time and dreamed truly of coming to live there. And so Georgia was my dream come true. And it's so funny because there are things about Georgia that don't fit in the box of dream. Like some of the plumbing in our rentals that we had was very sketchy, like smelled like a porta potty bathroom. In our second rental in Georgia, we had a bathroom that we wouldn't let anyone use. And I mean, thankfully we had enough bathrooms, it wasn't a big deal, but we kept it closed and we kept under the door blocked because it stunk so bad. And it was just something to do with the plumbing and not having traps, and I don't even know. Or like in my first rental, my kitchen in Georgia, if you didn't wear rubber shoes into the kitchen, it electrocuted you. So, and that's not going to be the case in every place in Georgia, but Georgia, it's a fairly newly modern country. So it's like, it's got this gorgeous, long, amazing history, but it was under Soviet control until the early 90s. And then it was a free-for-all. And I mean, people made do. People were tapping into electric. So the electric there, like, I'm sure there's codes, but people don't really have to follow the codes. Like, it's a little bit Wild West feeling there. Just like make do, make it work. And so that's part of what it's like living there. Driving in Georgia, like people just a little bit make up their own lanes. Everybody just goes where they're going, and somehow everybody doesn't hit each other. And I don't even know, there's this like sort of, I don't know, this Wild West, everybody make do, and then yet these really deep cultural, beautiful things. It was a completely fascinating place to live. The Georgian people were very kind and welcoming and loving. We made some very good friends there because it's not every international family who makes their way to Georgia. Like, we're a strange bunch of people, and we're a unique, outside the box group of people, and some of our dearest friends came from that time. So if you've been watching this series from the first episode where we became accidentally nomadic, I just invite you to continue to follow along. This is sort of a mini series about our life abroad within my 44 ways I built a life that doesn't break me, because the way I did that was moving abroad. That was the most essential way that I built a life that doesn't break me, is by actually following my dream to live abroad. And so I invite you to stick around for that. I will be explaining how we eventually ended up in Portugal. I alluded to it before, but I'm going to tell you more about Portugal tomorrow. I'm Andy. I'm here every day to remind you to dare to truly live. Life is very precious, so I want to see you living it, feeling alive in your own life, and finding beauty wherever you can, no matter what your circumstances are. Thanks for being with me today, and I will see you tomorrow.